All right, good evening and welcome to the Tuesday evening lecture series. My name is Amy Cardoso and I work in the education department with your beloved normal host, Terry Thornton. Just a few housekeeping things. After Linda's presentation, we will have a few minutes for a Q&A, so be thinking of your questions. Also, next week's lecture will feature Carol Ross Barney, lead juror for this year's Fort Worth AIA Annual Design Award, for which the Modern and the Fort Worth AIA again collaborate. Carol founded Ross Barney Architects in 1981 and has made significant contributions to the built environment, the profession, and architectural education. This will be another great experience, and I just wanted to remind you all that next week's lecture does start at 6:45 and not 6 o'clock, so just adjust that in your calendars. But as for tonight, you are in for a special treat as we hear from the artist Linda Ridgway about her recent works as well as stories from the past. Linda Ridgway has an MFA from Tulane University and a BFA from the Louisville School of Art. Her work has been included in various solo and group exhibitions, most recently last year in 2021, both at the Tyler Museum of Art and the Nasher Sculpture Center. She is also in the collections of the Dallas Museum of Art, the Grace Museum, the Museum of Fine Arts Houston, our collection obviously, the Phillips Collection in Washington, D.C., to name just a few. Linda's work ties together concepts, passions, and their sources within her evolving art-making process. Although initially educated as a printmaker, Ridgway experiments with the limits of various media to create work that remains intimate regardless of its scale. Her bronzes materialize from a two-dimensional template to become new objects that interpret personal experiences which cover themes of femininity, tradition, memory, and heritage. In these, Ridgway plays with the contrast of the delicate textures of lace and crochet work with the industrial resilience of metalwork. 3 Squares, made by Linda in 2001, was gifted to the Modern upon the opening of this building in 2002. And this piece was the first of her sculptures to combine an organic form with geometric ones. Her intent was to create something that nature would not have made, but put together as if it had occurred naturally. The idea of geometric shapes blending with an untamed appearance is a metaphor for the cycle of life, especially the balance between humans and nature, which is an ongoing theme. Her works on paper also show an intimacy and fascination with line. She uses these to create order and harmony atop nature-based imagery such as grasslands or tree groves. These gestural graphite and colored pencil forms visualize the wilderness through scattered and controlled marks. Often ethereal in their delicacy and their inclusion of impermanent organic material, her works question accepted understandings of nature and femininity. Her newest body of work, A Story in the Poet, which just recently closed at the Berggruen Gallery in San Francisco, California, right? Okay. Includes both bronze sculpture and works on paper and celebrates her use of poetry as her muse and nature as her grounding force for self-discovery. In remembering childhood readings of Robert Frost, she has stated, "The most efficient presentation of language, poetry is comforting and non-utilitarian, allowing for the beauty of self-awareness, of self-expression, of a universal whole. Poetry has been my muse, a way of getting to that artistic place where the world is lost, the body is left behind, and there is only the mind." Please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Linda Ridgway.
Well, hi, everybody. I'm so glad you're here. Can you hear me? Is everything good? Okay. I'm very pleased to have been asked to speak at the Tuesday evening program, and to present this latest groups of work that I just completed for the Berggruen Gallery, which I want to thank everyone there. I also want to thank Tally Dunn and the gallery in Dallas, who have been my kind of champions for many, many years for helping me and getting things organized and helping me to present my work to you and giving me the strength to carry on, as we say. So the name that I'm starting with is A Story and the Poet, Line by Line, and this was the title of my show in California. So I'm going to start with my first piece right here. This piece was purchased and given to the museum in 2001, and it's called Three Squares. It was remarkable in many ways because it was one of the earliest pieces that was so linear and delicate that Harry Gefford, who was my longtime partner and wonderful artist and who had Green Mountain Foundry, we worked together for many years, almost 20 plus years. And this piece right here was a challenge for him and for me. But I have to tell you how it was started. I was coming from the house to the studio, and I saw that large square at the bottom. Does this point? No. Oh, never mind. You see the larger square at the base there? And it was sticking out of the ground. And I was walking along, and it had been kind of exposed because of the tractor that Harry had just scraped the road. And all of a sudden, I saw that square, and I went, oh my goodness, that's wonderful. And so I went back to the studio and got me some shovels and started digging, and I thought, I'm going to dig that line out of there. And this is a grapevine root is what it is, okay? And I couldn't get it out. And I came back, and I said to Harry, I never will forget it, I said, there is a wonderful geometric root on the road. We need to get this root. And he said, I'll get the tractor. And so we literally, we pulled it out of the ground with him using the tractor to pull it out. So this has been in a lot of places, but pulling it out was more fun than anything. Taking that root out of the ground, it was great. The other two squares, you see at the middle and the top, I put those there, and that has to do with my father. And it also has to do with the idea of 3 is better than 1. And this right here, the first square was the natural square. The other 2 I put on there, and it was called 3 Squares because my dad always said, if we have 3 squares, everything is good. You know, so he was right. 3 squares are good, whether you're in the world of geometry or whether you're at the dinner table. 3 squares are great. So I'll show you a close-up. The beautiful thing about this is that I was amazed that we were able to get the delicacy that we were able to get with this piece. And the shadows that it created were kind of wonderful. I think when you see it in the gallery here, you won't, I've actually seen people go up to it and go, I don't see any squares, you know. And then they'll look around and they'll see it on the ground, they'll see the shadow and they go, well, there's the square. So it's almost a game to them, you know, where are the squares? And in my work, shadows are really important. They're the theater of the work. I thought I would also talk about this. This is one of the first people in my life that said I was an artist. You know, sometimes I wasn't very comfortable saying I was an artist until I was about 40. And this is me and my brother. And you can see he has the flower that I would later cast. No, only kidding. But this is us in the country. This is where I grew up. And I'm showing you this because he was a strong supporter of my work for many, many years. He passed away 2018. And it was very sad, so I did this piece in memory of him. And this is called Brother Line. And this is a piece that is also attributed to an artist that you all may know, Gene Owens. Gene Owens and I found this stick out on the land, and he also brought me a portrait of his brother. And I included that portrait with the line in the show at the Tyler Museum. But this one right here, when it was shown at the Berggruen Gallery, I felt like that didn't work anymore. Now, what did this have to do with my brother? I just felt like, we all have these lives that go in and out, up and down. There's all kinds of tangles and things that we feel. And look at that shadow, isn't that good? That's what I love about this piece, is the shadow. The close-up of it. I don't often say that I'm a sculptor. I actually feel like I'm a drawer, and that's a funny word, but I like to draw a lot, and I feel like these pieces are like drawings on the wall, and creating bronze that can be delicate and linear has been something I've been working with for, oh my goodness, for past 20 years for sure. I had my first show in Dallas in 1977, and so at Eastfield College, I'll never forget it. And it was a wonderful starting point. Later on, I met a group of ladies, and we all got together, and part of some of the people in the audience right now are friends of mine that were part of DW Gallery. It was a group of women starting to put together, it's almost like the Mickey Rooney and, we're going to put on a Broadway play, and we said we're going to create a space, and we're going to show art, and we worked hard, and we gallery sat, and we paid the phone bills, and I hung a lot of art for 11 years. I never forget it. I was really good at that. I wasn't good at spelling. And so they didn't put me in charge of the invitations, but only once. And I made a lot of mistakes, so there we go. This is the invitational wall of A Story and the Poet. And there is Brother Line. And it gives you a different viewpoint of it. And this is at the Berggruen Gallery. This was my 5th show with them. And it was in their new space. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend this show, but they did a wonderful job putting it together. And I just wanted you to kind of sense the scale of my work. Sometimes it's hard to see what's going on, but I think when you see the installation shots, you can tell kind of how things are placed. The wall is my palette. Is where I put my objects because I want the shadows to happen. There is, to the front here is Victoria and Albert. It's based on Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. The next one is The Story and the Poet, and the third one is called Glory. I have close-ups of those. Another installation shot of some of the drawings that were in that show. And they are printed images that I go back in and I draw or put ink on or gridding or whatever. This piece here was in a memorial piece to Gretchen Berggruen. It's called 3 Triangles for Gretchen. Gretchen, like Tally, was always a strong supporter of my work. And this piece right here, because I was working with the ideas of squares on my drawings at that time, my assistant, Ben Loftus, and I went down to a large fenced area at the end of my neighborhood near the golf course, and I wanted to do something with grapevines that would be similar to the vining that I had here at the museum. and finding grapevines. I was no longer at Green Mountain. It wasn't easy to find them, but all of a sudden I saw them all over my this fenced area by the golf course in Lakewood. So Ben and I went down there with our clippers, and we went chopping, and chopping for art material. I don't really go to easels too much. I go to the woods. And so this piece right here, as you can see, the three triangles and the movement, I felt like it was very lyrical. It came together so fast, I can't quite tell you how, but Ken King, who now does all my casting in Houston, was able to create very similar things as Harry was able to do, in the sense of all the delicacies that I wanted in a piece of sculpture. Now, this is a drawing that I did of a drawing and photograph. The photograph was actually done in 2001 for another show, and it never did quite work. And so I put it away. And you know, during the pandemic, we were all digging around in our supplies and things that we were looking for. And I dug these out, and I realized that this would go very well with the three triangles for Gretchen. And there was the triangle already. The lines on it, the gridding on it, is something that I was doing mainly because I was actually using the wire gridding to dip my leaves and nature into my wax pot and supporting it. And all of a sudden I realized this was a great grid. And so I started using the wire within my pieces. That's how art is. You don't always plan everything. Things kind of just, sometimes just fall in your lap and you go, thank you, thank you. There it is, I see it. This is also a piece that was printed first, and this one right here, just to make sure, this has a wonderful name. It's because it was grassy and wanted wear. This piece was basically the pine needles out at the Green Mountain Foundry. All in the woods there, they would fall and they'd just step all over them. And I realized that they were just these wonderful, small little lines that just, I was so excited. I took them all down out of bag, down to flatbed press, and we inked them, and we started printing them, and I just started laying them all over. And I brought it back, and it was printed, and I drew on them, and I went, oh, it's not right, it doesn't work. So then I thought, well, I'll throw some ink on it. So that's kind of, sometimes things just kind of evolve. It's not like you completing it, you come back to it, you kind of mess around with it some more. And so I put the ink on it, and you can see up close the ink and the lines. And I tried to be free with the ink. I'm not really free. Let's put it that way. I really like borders and lines and restrictions, you know. I'm almost architectural in some time. But this right here was my freedom. And then I realized that I had to contain the freedom, and that's why the grid's on top. The grid is there to contain it all. And the title comes from a poem by Robert Frost, one of my favorites. And then this is Agnes Martin, and this is called Leaf. I love the title. Don't you love the title? Look for the leaf. In 1998, Lene Glott and I went to see this show. Do you remember, Lene? Yeah. It was a beautiful show. It was at the Modern Art Museum across the street, the older one, and it took our breath away. This show was just beautiful. And it was put in combination with Richard Tuttle, another artist that has been someone always important to me. But this right here, the gridding of this is so beautiful if you look at it, and her satisfaction with the grid. and the layers, that thin rinse that you would put on things, just beautiful. The combination of painting and drawing and not quite painting and not quite drawing, that's what I love about Agnes Martin. And then you have me, going back to nature again. This is called the Grassland in the Meadow. This was from the meadow at Green Mountain. I gathered grasses and took them down to flatbed and printed them. I wanted to give you the sense of the wind and the movement through the grasses that I was seeing when I walked in the meadow. And then I would bring it back, and then I draw on top of it. And I once had a young person at an art opening say to me, so what do you use on that? And I said, well, it's printed, and then I go back and I use all my pencils, and I start drawing on it. And he said, you mean you just use pencils? And I said, yes. And he said, never forget it. He said, well, I guess that's all right, but it's rather archaic. And I went, oh boy, I love that. That's good. You know, I'm in an archaic world, but I love all my pencils. I lay them out. I have, you know, as many pencils that, you know, it's a pile of pencils. I love pencils. So anyhow, about this time too, and I wanted to give you the date on this because this is one of the earliest ones. This is With or Without. It was in 2015. And this piece here was not the very first one that I did. I'll show you the first one just a second. This is the first one I did of what I call a Briar Line. And I looked up the briars today on the internet. I wanted to find out were they just locally here in Texas. You know, sometimes people call them the cursed vines because they have thorns on them and you catch your clothes when you're walking in the woods and everything. But I saw them as beautiful lines that twisted and turned and everything. This is called Signature. Backing up to this one, Signature led to this one, which this is called With or Without. It was in 2015, and it was a piece that I felt like I was getting to the point where I was understanding how to be, well, I want to say it like this. I was understanding how to dissect space and make it dance. Does that make sense? Okay. And I wanted it to feel, it almost has a portrait kind of look to it, like you know, the Duchamp portraits. And then, depending on where you moved and looked at it, the box beside it is a drawer box that opens up, and inside of that were the leaves that were on the line. And what happened was I was waxing. When you do the casting, because I use direct casting, I have to wax the leaves. And so I was taking each leaf off and numbering them because I'm obsessive, and I was going to put each leaf back on the location of where it should go on the vine that I had just taken them off. And I was numbering them like a crazy person. And then all of a sudden I realized that the line was beautiful without the leaves, but the leaves were beautiful too. So I consider the box full of leaves, those are the leaves that would have been on the line. Because they were separated from the line, it became with or without. With the leaves, it became a natural link of nature. Without the leaves, it became an abstraction of and a diagram of space. And I liked the idea of that. Inside of there is one gold leaf. It's like a little touch to see. You could actually pick up the leaves and play with them and put them back in the box, just like you did when you were a kid playing in the button box. You probably don't know what I'm talking about, but my mother had a button box that I played with. How many people had a button box? Anybody? Oh, wow, I love it. Great. That's super. So, and again, this is called signature. Someone said to me, what is your signature? And so I made this piece. This is my signature. I love lines. This here is a piece called Limestone Song, and it is also a Briar Line. And so I decided to just show things that do talk about lines. And this piece was originally it was going to be a commission piece. But what happened was the commission kind of fell through. And I was on about the 4th line. And I was putting it up in the studio out at Green Mountain, and I found out it wasn't going to work. And I remember Harry saying to me, he said, well, you should finish this piece. And I said, oh, I don't know, He said, oh, you really should finish this piece. This is going to be a good piece. You need to finish it. And so, sometimes you just need someone who will encourage you. And if you're lucky, you'll have that person in your life that will help you. There's the side view of it. You can kind of see how it's hanging on the wall. There was pressure. Each line is separate, and the pull of it straightened the lines. And it was rather difficult, but like Fred Astaire, he could dance and you thought you could dance too, You don't want to show how much sweat is involved in trying to make this work. But it was a difficult piece. And you can see a close-up of the wonderful leaves. I always liked the leaves. They were just kind of like heart shapes. The nice thing about this was that the gallery here in Dallas, Tadao Ando Gallery, they talked with a collector and they purchased it, which was wonderful. It finally happened, It was kind of like I made this piece for one reason, and then it became something else. And then I learned a lot about pressure and how to mount something on a wall and make it move and kind of, if you took these briar lines off the wall, they kind of almost roll up into a ball. The pressure of the wall supporting became an engineering factor for it. So it was a piece I liked. This is me and my grandmother. No, but the piece is called Evening Line Seeking Its Source. And when a friend of mine gave me this vine and said, I've been saving this for you, and that happens to me sometimes. People will give me lace or fabric or vines or things like that, and I put it in a corner somewhere, and a year later I might use it. But this lady gave me this, and it was in 2 pieces, and I thought, well, do I use both pieces or one piece? And I started playing with it, and I realized it almost felt like 2 figures, a child and a grown-up, and a mother. And I thought about my grandmother, because my grandmother was a dowser, and I love telling this story, because it's true what she did. A dowser, do you know what a dowser is? Anybody? Yeah. She was I thought she was kind of half witch too when I was growing up. She did the strangest thing. She was in Kentucky, and I grew up there with her, and we walked the fields, and chickens pecking on my ankles, and all kinds of great stuff with my grandmother. She was wonderful. But a dowser is someone who can find water with a stick that almost has a kind of a triangular form with a center stick, a rod, a pointing rod going from the triangle. And she would, I went with her one time, and I was a little kid, and we all got in the car, and this gentleman came and said, Viola, that was her name, we need help. We want to do a well out here, but we're not sure where we might find it. And can you help us? And she literally would take her stick, and we would go find water. And I remember thinking as a kid how remarkable that was. She was also remarkable because she argued with my father to allow me to go to art school. Now, it sounds funny today, but back in the 60s when I went to art school, oftentimes you were supposed to do what your parents told you to do, right? And they weren't too excited about me being an artist, but my grandmother was. She just thought that was going to be grand. And so she literally had an argument with my dad in a cornfield and said, "You better let her go." And so he always did what his mother told him to do. And so I got to go to art school. So this is me and my grandmother. And there's some details of it. See the shadows? Aren't those? I love the shadows. I think I keep saying the shadows are so important. They add the dimension to these pieces. They extend it beyond the wall or the paper or whatever. This is the story of the poet. I'm sorry, A Story and the Poet, which was the name of the show out in California. But I made this piece prior to that, and it was just the stick. And then I realized that it wasn't finished, and I brought it back from the gallery and started messing around with it. And that's when the wire became part of it, because I wanted a kind of three-dimensional square shadow to go with it. The domino that you see here was a domino that Ken King made for Harry and I. And we used to play dominoes every evening after we would work in the studio to kind of relax. But we were so competitive. We each wanted to win. And so we could remember whose turn it was. And Ken was so tired of this, he made us a domino, okay? And so we could slide it back and forth. It's your turn. No, it's your turn. It's your turn, your turn. Yeah, and so we would play with that. So that domino became a part of it. The reason it's with this stick form is it's a stick that we found, and don't tell anybody, but we found it at the Rocky Mountain Preserve, and we fought over it. Can you believe you fight over a stick? I mean, it's kind of crazy. But it was I'm going back to it. You see how sexy it is? It's a sexy stick, you know? I won because it was sexy. I said, it's a lady, Harry. You know, it's my stick. So I got the stick. So, but Ken ended up casting it, so. I'm putting this in because there are certain things that are what I call hallmarks and things that you see that change your life. And this show that the Modern had in 1998 was remarkable to me because it did have Agnes Martin and Richard Tuttle. There was a piece that's very similar to the right. That's the catalog from the show. And if you can get one, you should, because it's gorgeous. The image on the right over there is a piece of paper that's been folded, it's watercolored, and then there's pencil on the line. I don't know if you can see it, but it's very delicate. This is Richard Tuttle's. And I remember seeing this at the Modern, at the older building, and it was on a wall, and the piece of paper that was in that show was only about 6 inches tall, very short. But it looked like this. It was an L shape. It had a little bit of watercolor on it, and then it had a pencil line under it, around it, extending it like I do with my shadows, extending the piece. When I saw that piece, I was like, and it was on this huge wall, 20 feet in the air, and and that was the only thing on the wall, and it was slightly below, I never will forget it, slightly below eye level, and it held the wall. Sometimes as an artist, we feel like we have to put a lot of stuff. And I looked at that and I went, oh my goodness, look at that. I was amazed that he understood that was enough. because I did not understand it at the time. And so what happened was that I started realizing, where do I put my objects on the wall? I don't just put them up there. I think about, should they be near the floor? Should they be above my eye level? Where should they be? And that's all from Richard Tuttle. At the same time, I was involved in things that are dying, and I loved what I call the end of life, the end of things, the wrinkles and the twinkles and all the things that happen. This piece right here is called Glory, the beauty of the end, I'm calling it. The line of poetry underneath is from Shakespeare: was never called to bear my part or show the glory of our art. It's from Macbeth. The witch Hecate said that, okay? I just felt like this was a beautiful glory of the end. This piece right here, talking about end, this was some pieces that I put together, and these were pieces that were at the end of the cleanup at the foundry. I found all these things that I had made and never quite used, so I started putting things together. And this piece right here is called The Diagram from the River Ouse, and it's about Virginia Woolf and her final walk into the water. This piece, I did a series of diagrams, and I'm trying to remember when I did these diagrams. I have them. Let me see, I had that over here when I did the diagrams. It's not really that important, but I did them in 2003. I did a whole series of diagrams, and I called them Ikebana Diagrams. And one of my students gave me a book on the Ikebana flower arrangement, and they did these diagrams of how to put them in. And I had never seen anything like it, and this is my own Ikebana. There was no diagram for it. It was what I wanted to do after doing a whole series of flower arrangements. And I love the idea of Ikebana trying to prescribe beauty. How do we find beauty? How do we do that, you know? It's really something. And then this piece right here, another poetry kind of piece, is related back to Richard Tuttle, believe it or not, which is like, why does that relate back, you know? When Richard Tuttle was here giving a talk on a Tuesday lecture, I never will forget what he said. He said, making art is not about the beginning, and it's not about the end, it's about the middle. And I absolutely fell in love with that statement, because I thought, he's right. I mean, at the beginning, you're nervous, you don't even want to start it, you walk into the studio and go, what am I gonna do now, you know? And then you work on it, and you're so happy when you're working on it. You know, oh boy, I'm working, I'm happy, you know. And then at the end, you gotta let it go. And so there's kind of a loss or a grief going on, but the magic of your art is in the middle. And this piece here has no beginning and no end. It's basically it could go on forever. I could have put daisies forever. I could have put 7 more, you know, but I didn't, you know. This piece right here is, and I'm going to make sure I have the right name. Hang on. But the secret sits in the middle and knows. And it's the title from that came from a 2-line poem, and I won't bore you with it too much, but it's 2 lines, and so it's called "The Secret Sits," and it's by Robert Frost, my hero. It says, "We dance round in a ring and suppose, but the secret sits in the middle and knows." Now, Robert Frost knew it, and so did Richard Tuttle, so I had to find out myself. And it is in the middle, right? Sits in the center. So, and this is a detail of that. This was fun to work on, that piece was. This piece right here is called Warsaw Garden. It's hard to say, Warsaw. And this is a thorny, kind of bushy piece of refuse that I found out at the foundry. And I think it had to do with some of the, again, I like thorny things. I like things that catch you, snag you if they would. And this was a piece that was intended to be much more delicate. And I had asked my assistant, Ben Loftus, I said, take that over to the wax plot and throw some wax on that, and then I'll take the hairdryer and make it all thin, and we'll do that. And so I come over there, and he's put a lot of wax on it. And I went, woo, that's a lot of wax. And I won't forget it. And then I looked at it, and I went, that's not bad. So we left it, you know. And so the casting of that, and you can kind of see, you can see the thorns, but the thorns have been protected by the wax. There's no more thorns to this one. The Warsaw Garden comes from a poem about the destruction during World War II, okay, of people and places. This piece right here, this one is Before the Weather Turned to Gray. Again, it's a poem from Robert Frost. And this is just sticks and little pine needles and things that I found. I decided to do it in 2 layers so that I got a lot more depth to it. It's small. This is a small piece. I'm going to say 15 by 15 or something. But you can kind of see I'm experimenting with color and non-color. The black has a patina on it, and the area on the top has just been basically sandblasted and put an emulsion on it to keep it from turning green, you know. And here I am. Teresa Rafiti took this picture of me by accident. No, she said, let's just take your picture. And I was out at the foundry, and this is taken before the piece was actually cast, and it's called Reaching, and I was so happy that I was actually going to cast it. I'd made the decision to cast it, and you can kind of see this is how it was after it was cast. You can see that I tried to maintain the same color of the, this is a mock orange, scrubby kind of bush that was growing out in the entryway at the foundry. Look at that shadow, isn't that nice? But I'm sorry, you're not supposed to like, it's just like I love those shadows. At the same time, at the foundry, Harry had these what we call canes. Some people would call them bamboo. I'm not sure. He always said they were called cane and not bamboo. And again, this was in my 2001 photograph series. I took photographs of them, kind of climbed into this wall of cane, and did the photograph, and then pulling it back out, did a grid on it in 2022, and you can see the grid. And I liked it because it was like looking through a screen door when you're a kid and you're looking out at things. And so I'm casting, these are some of the last pieces of cane that I left when I left the foundry for the last time. And these are, I'm going to call this piece Gathered Line. I thought you would like to see how they look at the foundry. They have been cast. We haven't put them together yet because I have to go down there and deal with the engineering of it. And you can kind of see how each piece has been sprued up. You can see the sprue marks and everything. And then this is the piece before it was cast, and this is what it's gonna look like if I can get it to stay on the wall at 35 pounds that it's gonna be, because it's kind of heavy, but we'll see. And then, this is what I'm working on right now. It's another grapevine line. I'm dealing with the idea of 3 lines of a piece of wood that my neighbor's tree had rotted, and I loved. I've had that now 3 years, and I don't know. I just want to use that piece of wood. A line drawn to decide whether earth and sky, and then the line in the foreground, my horizon. Close up, you can kind of see. Oftentimes, I do drawings for templates, and I leave that on the wall, so that's what that drawing is behind it. This has got 1 pin in it right now, and when I cast it, it's going to be 1 pin, and it's going to move a little bit. Like if you touch it, it's going to go boom, boom, boom. And I like the simplicity of it. It's only taking me, what, from 1977 to get simple? But I'm getting there. So that's it, folks. Anybody have a question? Oh, you have a question? Yes. Please speak loud because my hearing aids are broken.
So tell us a little more about how you get from organic material, the process in the foundry, because I don't fully understand it or appreciate it. And where is the foundry? Where is Green Mountain Foundry?
Well, I used to do all my casting with Harry Gefford, who had a foundry here outside of Fort Worth, who I was introduced to Harry by Francis Bagley, told me about Harry doing this foundry. He was also a lead teacher here at the sculpture department at TCU. And I had taken some pieces. I had gone to a showing in Washington, D.C. with my brother, who was living there at the time, and I saw a Giacometti show, and I really fell in love with it. But because prior to that, I had been making wooden architectural structures, and I decided I wanted to make something more organic. And so I decided I'm going to do casting. And so coming back to Texas, I tried to find some places, and I would take some things in. My earliest work, I knew nothing about casting. I knew nothing about putting it together. In fact, I think sometimes not knowing things is excellent. And the reason is you don't know your boundaries. You know, I remember I would call Harry up and I'd say, can I cast this plastic da-da-da-da? And he'd go, no, you can't do it, it's gonna explode, you know. And he'd say, well, I said, okay, if I get this vine here, can we do that? He said, yes, but we're gonna have to put wax on it. And so, I mean, it was all that kind of learning thing. So what you're asking me is, what do I do? Well, I see something, and as I said, I get my shears out and I start chopping things and putting it together, and then waxing it and wiring it together. And then I would take it to the foundry, and I'd pretty much have it the way I wanted it to look. I didn't take like a scrap of stuff and say, let's just cast it and then I'll put it together. Everything I took was already diagrammed, as you say, because I'm a control freak and I want it all to be the way I want it, you know? And so that's what I would do. And I learned how much wax to put on and all of those different things, you know. I've been casting since 1985, and I still learn things. I love to learn things with it, what will work and what won't work, you know. I like the material of bronze. I like the idea that I can make these thin little delicate lines through the support of wonderful artisans and who know how to make that happen. I will say that Harry Gefford could cast. He used to say I would bring things to him and he'd say, "I cannot cast frog hairs, Linda. Quit bringing in this delicate stuff." And so we would start, and my earliest work was really heavy. I didn't even know how to make a mold, so I had these big rocks in my yard, and I poured out sheets of wax and took a hammer and beat the wax around the rock, and then I slipped that rock out of it, because I didn't even know how to make a mold. I was a printmaker, you know. And so, but not knowing how to do something was very exciting. Does that make sense? Am I helping? Yeah. So you take things, you wax them, and then we cut them up, and because you can't cast the whole great big thing, you have to cut it into pieces. Does that help? Yeah. And it's called direct casting. So if I lost it, I lost it. In other words, if it exploded, it was gone. There was no molds. I didn't like making molds. Never liked. Yes.
So I'm interested in the fact that you're using limbs, and I'm wondering, I was wondering, do you have a desire to do trees? I know you did the sound of trees in 2015. And
Wow,
you have the small trees, right?
Yeah, baby trees.
Baby trees.
Yeah.
Have you had a desire, I don't know what King's Foundry's like parameters are, but do you want a bigger tree ever?
Well, in a way I would, but there's a wonderful artist named Giuseppe Peroni,
Mm-hmm.
you might know about, and he's already done some beautiful trees and dying trees, which I absolutely love. There's one in Houston in their garden right now. And I think, for me personally, I like the intimacy of the delicate, of the small. I mean, when I do something really large, it's kind of, it's not that it's out of character, but even when I do it large, I try to make it delicate. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So am I going to do a large tree? Well, if I do, it's going to be different than Giuseppe's.
Right.
But I love his work. It's like, I love how he thinks. He's so conceptual. I oftentimes feel like I become too literal. And so I love the idea. That's the reason With or Without is to me, is a really strong piece, because it's not only is it visually literal, but it's also, I think, conceptual, how you think about it. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot, and it makes me want to ask you about the shadows.
Yes.
Have you ever thought about just documenting the shadows that they cast?
You mean making pieces just shadows?
Yes.
No, but that's a good idea.
I'm interested because that excitement that you have right now, when you start talking about shadows, you light up. So it's like, I would want to see you, go and get the shadows.
Well, I have actually done drawings years ago of shadows. I did that when my babies, who are now 40 and 42, I did a lot of I did finger puppets for them, and and I did all these finger puppet drawings for my kids. And but I've never thought about, like you're talking about, the shadows. But yeah, that's a great idea. To me, the shadows are the magic. I often say the piece isn't worth anything unless it's got a good shadow, because it's like turning the coin over. It's the other side of the piece. Does that make sense? I always ask that because I just don't know if I'm making sense. Anybody else? Yes.
Linda, I met you at the mountain.
I can't hear you. I'm
I
sorry.
said, I met you out at the mountain probably 20 years ago when you were casting doilies and such things. And I've always gotten the impression that the casting was just a matter of the functionality and the permanence of the material. It had nothing to do with the temporality of the objects. I mean, the objects are so beautiful and frail and in nature
Yes,
impermanent.
yes.
But I never get the impression that you're just casting them because, oh, look how thin I can make this thing.
No,
I
that's
never
not
got,
part of it.
it's not part of the narrative.
No. I mean, I'm glad that I'm able to do that, but that's not really, it's more about a linear composition, I'm
Right.
thinking. Does that make sense?
It's like a 3D drawing.
It's drawing.
Yeah, it's drawing.
It's 3D drawing, that's what I'm doing. And I've always been uncomfortable to say sculpture, that I do that. Because I feel more comfortable saying that I like the lines, and I like the movement, and I like to thread things in and out of space.
Well, sculpture doesn't blow away.
No, it's
Sculpture
still,
isn't something that you,
it's still there, but I know, I've always been overwhelmed by the center of the room. And I keep trying, I haven't given up. I've got a few pieces right now that are gonna go in the center of the room, and I'm so excited. But that's not usually where I land. I land on the wall,
yeah.
like a bug on the wall. Is that it? Everybody happy?
Looks good.